It is such a pleasure to have our guest today with us, Dee Foster. Welcome.
Hey, Bonnie, it's great to see you. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here today. And let's get started.
Yeah,
First,
I
tell
really
us.
enjoy I'm really enjoying seeing all your other podcasts, and I think what you're doing is great. So I'm honored to be a part of this.
Oh, thank you so much. It's truly inspiring. It inspires me, listening to all the stories. And we had a conversation on the phone that was just supposed to be like a 10 or 15-minute conversation. And I think we talked for like an hour, and it was so inspiring. I loved it. So, first
Well,
off, tell us where you're from, and then tell us what you do for a living.
I'm originally from Dallas, Texas, and right now I live in the Woodlands. But I'm every week I travel back and forth from Austin or the Hill Country or North Texas. I'm kind of all over Texas right now. And but what I do for a living, I manage artists. I not only manage musical artists, I manage artists of all kinds, painters. I work with corporations on driving brands, anything to get people to the next level. That's what my company does, and that's what I do pretty much day in and day out. So it's very inspiring to work with these creative people, and it's inspiring to get them to see them grow and get to the next level, and that's what it's all about for me.
So, what ignited your passion for this? I mean, where did it start?
Well, I think I can go back to I was a volunteer on a presidential campaign back when I was about 19 years old. I always wanted to be a part of a bigger picture. And so I volunteered, and unfortunately, my candidate for president lost that year. That was back in '92, and I went to the University of Arkansas, and I met up with some friends there, and they invited me to come up to DC and go to work for the White House. And that took me to multiple countries, many, many, many countries across the world. And I built big events for the president. And what we did is started, doing advance work for the president. We would go all over the country domestically and internationally, and we would put together the events. It takes about 5 days to put together a 10-second soundbite, which you would see on TV on MSNBC or CNN or Fox News or whatever. It takes about 5 days to bring that all together. So you've got staging, you've got backdrops, you've got all kinds of messaging that you've got to do. So that's how I got my start. And then after that, I moved back to the South. After that, I got kind of homesick because I worked for after the White House, I went to work for CNN as a producer and ended up, working with Judy Woodruff and Wolf Blitzer, Greta Van Susteren, and ended up on Crossfire back in the day when we had Bill Press and Robert Novak and a young Tucker Carlson. And then 9/11 happened, and I stayed there and covered 9/11 until about the end of 2002, and then came back to the South and started running campaigns, working on campaigns. And so for me, it's always been about getting that person to the next level. But in politics, I lost my passion in politics and wanted to leave that. And so I headed back to Dallas, worked in the oil and gas world for about 7 years. And then my mother unfortunately ended up getting cancer, and I spent about 2 years with her in between 2011 and 2013, basically running her campaign and being her honor guard that ushered her to heaven. And we had more fun in 2 years. And I think as a person, that was the pivoting point for me as a person, where I became comfortable in my own skin. And the reaches, I was about 40 years old when that happened. And I decided that working on a 12th floor of a building in Dallas, doing oil and gas was probably not for me, and I needed to move on. And that's when I moved to Austin. And it was April the 28th of 2014 is when I decided to move to Austin. I had no idea what I was going to do. Music has always been my passion since I was 5 years old. My family constantly played country music. My grandmother even held the window open of an old house with a radio that you could hear on the inside and out. And from there, our whole family just had music. I never learned how to play guitar or any kinds of instruments, but we always loved the musicians. Everybody. You had George Jones, My dad loved Merle Haggard. And then my dad introduced me to Jerry Jeff Walker and Gary P. Nunn and Michael Martin Murphy and all those Willie Nelson and Waylon. Of course, growing up in Texas, you pretty much had that in your bottle when you were a child. And so my passion for Texas music started at a very, very young age. As a matter of fact, managing Gary P. Nunn, as I have for the last 6 years, I took Gary P. Nunn's London Homesick Blues, and everybody knows it for its famous chorus, I want to go home with the armadillo, and putting you back in that Texas bar. When I was traveling all over the world, I had a little Walkman back in the day, and it was one of those waterproof Walkmans that you could put a cassette in. And I would put Jerry Jeff Walker's Viva Trilingua in there, and the song number 10 was London Homesick Blues. And when you would get homesick, being in a 5-star hotel by yourself, you would turn on that and fall asleep, and it would put you back in Texas again. So, in 2014, when I moved down, I left my suit and tie, I untucked my shirt, I started growing a beard. My passion is photography. When I want to get away and go to Trilingua, a lot of people see that on my Facebook who follow me, that I love landscape photography, but I shot a lot of concert photography. And I think the big deal that I did back in June of 2014, after I kind of let go of everything, was I shot the back cover of George Strait's 2014 Cowboy Rides Away album.
That is incredible. I love it.
Getting that and moving, I did a big project with Matthew McConaughey in 2014 for the Oxford American Magazine. Spent 2 great years with a wonderful songwriter who mentored me and kind of the backstory of Texas music, and that was Kimmy Rhodes. Kimmy worked with Willie. She had a very famous husband named Joe Gracie, who was a famous DJ on Coke FM back in the day. He was pretty much the person that coined the term progressive country music. And so with Kimmy's help through 2014 and 15, I took on Gary P. Nunn in 2016, about 6 years ago. And it's been a magical ride. And so I kind of, I'm going back to my heroes like Gary, Jerry Jeff Walker, Michael Martin Murphy, some of those guys, and retelling the story of how Texas music really ended up getting started. And just recently, we put the Lost Gonzo band back together. Many people know the Lost Gonzo band because they remember it was Jerry Jeff Walker and the Lost Gonzo band. But where the Lost Gonzos got their start was when Bob Livingston was playing with Ray Wiley Hubbard with Three Faces West. They spent a lot of time up in Red River, and that's where the song Up Against the Wall, Redneck Mother actually took place. The famous bumper sticker that says goat ropers need loving too. There's many stories of how that song came about, but Bob decided to go to California and picked up a hitchhiker there in California that said that he knew a guy from Dallas, Texas named Mike Murphy, and he happened to be out in California. And Bob called him, and they got together, and Mike Murphy brought Bob Livingston back to Texas. And when they got back to Texas, they ran into Gary P. Nunn. Gary P. Nunn just happened to be 4 years older than Bob Livingston. Bob always looked up to Gary, even said he was his hero back in the day because Gary was a part of a band called Sparkles, the Sparkles back in the day when he was from Brownfield, and Bob being from Lubbock in high school, the Sparkles were a really big band in West Texas. So they got together with Michael. That's where the genesis in 1972 of the Lost Gonzo band came together. Michael Martin Murphy was the founder, the person who basically founded Texas music when he put Herb Steiner on a steel guitar on Geronimo's Cadillac and Cosmic Cowboy. And then from there, the band left there and went to Jerry Jeff Walker. Gary and Michael went back to London. That's where Gary did a writing exercise. And the first verse that he put down, "It's cold over here, and I swear, I wish they would turn the heat on." And that verse right there went to other verses, which came back to Texas in 1973. And Jerry Jeff ran into Gary P. Nunn at the squeeze in, and the other Gonzos had already moved over to Jerry Jeff. And Jerry Jeff asked Gary P. Nunn to come down and play on his Viva Terlingua album that took place live at Luckenbach on August the 18th, 1973. So telling those stories, the inspiration that comes from those stories, you know, a lot of people think Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings started Texas country music. Well, they were definitely the wildfire. But Michael Murphy wrote a very famous song called Wildfire.
Oh,
And that really sparked the whole genesis of Texas progressive country music that started in the early 70s.
oh, I love it. It's so incredible. You have so much knowledge of this, and I bet a lot of us don't even realize this from Texas.
I've found that a lot of people, you know bits and pieces, but they don't know the whole story. And what I'm really trying to do, my passion is to help people see that we're watching a beautiful, beautiful sunset. And if you've ever tried to take a picture of a sunset, you know how fast the sun moves going down.
Oh, yes.
And these guys are in the fourth quarter of their lives. We don't make it out of this world alive. I'm not trying to be morbid, but I'm just trying to encourage everybody right now to get out and see, while they're still here, the guys who were the pioneers, who 20 years from now will go down in folklore forever. I mean, stories will be written and written and written about the pioneers that are still alive today. We need to catch them. Tomorrow we get to play. We're so honored. The Gonzos we did a show at Green Hall on October the 22nd of last year. And that was probably one of the most magical shows I've ever been to in my entire life. We had about 900 people there. You could have held a cell phone up in the middle of that crowd and charged it. It was just such an electric experience. And so from there, last week we were at the Paramount Theater for the Nobelity Project in front of about 1,000 people. We were honored there. Ray Wiley Hubbard came out and sorry about that. We can cut that out. You may start all over again on that.
Just Ray Wiley Hubbard.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay. So anyway, last week we were at we went to the Paramount Theater and were joined for the Nobelity Project, and Ray Wiley Hubbard joined us on stage. And I saw that being an incredible, watching these guys come back together, because a lot of times a lot of people think that they see each other all the time, but they really don't, because artists kind of move parallel. They never cross paths too much. So getting these guys back together again is just a magical moment. So we've got a number of shows that the Gonzos are going to do over the year. We're going to play Willie Nelson's Luck Reunion tomorrow. That'll be a big thing. Michael Martin Murphy is joining us on that. And, you know, that's about 4,000 people out at Willie's Ranch, and it doesn't get any better than that. It's just amazing.
Oh my God, that sounds incredible. I had the opportunity, thanks to you, to see Gary P. Nunn in Colorado, Steamboat Springs. They have a big music festival, and just seeing him perform, I thought, oh my gosh, I want that energy. And all of his songs are like just good vibe, positive, you know, just like happy. He's got like a happy vibe, and I love that. I said I want to have that. And then it's funny because later in the evening, I guess as it got later, or maybe it was another night, he was just down in the hotel, and there were a lot of people kind of gathered around, and he just sat down on the piano and started playing, and everybody started singing along, and it was just so cool. I have pictures from it, and a lot of friends.
Well, Gary P. Nunn, out of all the people I've worked with in my life, he has stepped up to the plate. A lot of people don't realize that Gary had a 527 batting average. So my metaphor of what I'm saying is back when he was in high school, he was best all-around athlete. the guy is absolutely a genius. I mean, he had a 4.0 in high school. He went on to the University of Texas. He could have been a pharmacist or a doctor. He had a 3.89 average. He didn't end up finishing college there because he decided that music was more important after he got back from London. Murphy really encouraged him to stay in the music. So, you know, everything I've ever asked for Gary over the last 6 years, you know, he debuted on the Grand Ole Opry on August the 3rd, 2019. He wrote his memoir. Anything I ask of him, he steps up to the plate and just knocks it over the center field fence. It's amazing. At 76 years old, that guy has more energy than most 30-year-olds, and he's got the endurance of a horse. So it's been quite an honor to work with somebody like that, and I'm very honored to be a part of his career.
That's incredible. You were telling me that there's a song that he wrote that no one realizes that he wrote it.
Well, when I first met with him, I went around. Sometimes I have a tendency of asking people, you know, because of politics. You take polls and you ask people, you know, I would ask people, I said, you know, what is the number one song that Gary P. Nunn wrote? And they would always say like London Homesick Blues or What I Like About Texas. But being that he wrote this in 1972, years ago, that was 50 years ago now, that he wrote the song. Well, in 1983, which is about almost 40 years ago, he gets a call from Willie's team, and Willie calls him over to where we're actually going to be tomorrow, down by his studio. And they asked him if they could record The Last Thing I Needed. The first thing this morning was to have you walk out on me. And the funny story was in 2017, we got a call from Chris Stapleton. Unbeknownst to Chris, Gary had written this song. He had always thought that that Willie Nelson had written The Last Thing I Needed. So Gary and I traveled out to RCA Room A. The album was called From Room A, that David Cobb produced in Nashville for RCA, and Universal Nashville was behind this, and they called us out and said, would you like to come to a listening party? Chris would really like to cut this song. And so we were standing there, and of course Gary P. Nunn was in his little bandana and his glasses and his hat, looked very distinguished with his sport coat on. And Chris walked up to him and said, it's so nice to meet you, Gary, but I have to tell you, I always thought that Willie Nelson wrote this song. And Gary says, well, if anybody ever accuses Willie Nelson of writing one of your songs, that's okay with me.
I love it.
I mean, Gary never thought that anybody would ever follow Willie Nelson, but Chris did one heck of a job on cutting that. And that was back in 2017 on that Room A album. And I promise you, when we were sitting there, it was the second track that came on. And both of our knees kind of buckled when we heard Chris singing it. He even brought in Mickey Raphael to play harmonica. So it was very, very authentic. And that was what a great thrill to see that happen.
That is incredible. To have two people pick up a song that you wrote. Oh my God, that's amazing. Does he perform it at every show?
Gary?
Yes.
Oh, Gary performs that at every show. Yeah. I mean, that's probably one of the last songs right before London Homesick Blues and What I Like About Texas that he does. And, you know, Gary's changed up his, you know, back in the day, he was just playing dance halls, and now he plays theater. After 25 years, I got him to pull his piano back out, and he got his chops again on the piano. Like I said, you know, anything I've ever asked him to do, he just knocks it out of the park. And so we do a lot of theater shows. We've done shows, about 100 shows a year, and the guy just has the endurance, like I said, of a horse, and he just keeps plowing through, and he gets better with time. And I'm really proud that he's still able to do that.
That's incredible. So, well, tell us about, is there someone that influenced your journey, like someone in particular?
You know, I have to go back to my 8th grade teacher. She's unfortunately, she passed away. And Back in the day, it was pretty tough growing up in the 70s. You were eating paint chips and, you know, uh, I don't see how anybody made it through the 70s, but we did, compared to what these kids are going through today. They have a cakewalk compared to the 70s, and children of the 70s are tough. We were all real tough, but she inspired me. There's a guy named Zig Ziglar that has passed away as well. And she taught that in her class. And she just taught me how to always think bigger, think outside the box, never settle for just the status quo, always go bigger. So that's the way my mind's always thought. I've always thought, had a huge imagination. If you're going to have a fireworks display, have a gigantic fireworks display. Never bore people. Give them a great experience. And so, the way I look at beauty in life is I don't see just skin deep. I'm looking at people's soul, and I see a beautiful landscape. And then, I love romance. I love the romance, and romance is just a path of how you get to the wealth. And a lot of people think wealth is money, but to me, it's really not. It's the enrichment that you do in your life. I go down to Terlingua and shoot photos down in the Big Bend all the time. And I'll meet people down there that have a lot of money. And we'll sit down and we'll talk for a while. And they'll say, we've made it all. We've made all of this in money, but we're down here trying to find ourselves. And I think that's the greatest thing in life is when you actually find yourself, and then you become comfortable in your own skin. But if you're just focused on money and not enriching yourself with education, and I'll tell you, if I challenge people a day to take a song a day and really rip that song apart, find out why the songwriter, focus on the songwriter, not really the presenter on stage. Man, that has enriched my life, because you're tearing apart what people went through in their lives to write. No number one, probably 95% of all number one songs came from a broken heart. And, a lot of people had a lot of journeys getting to that number one song in their life. And it was not easy. It was not easy. You may see George Strait on stage doing what he does and playing in front of hundreds of thousands of people, but he paid a price to get there. And I think that's what's lacking today. People aren't willing to go through what it takes to be great. They just want to take the easy route. And the easy route basically gets you nowhere.
Right. There's so many influencers and just, TikTok stars, and it's just crazy.
Yeah.
So with what you do, I mean, you're constantly in contact with stars, famous country stars. And so do you ever get imposter syndrome? Like, what am I doing here?
No, I think that I've been led to the right place. I mean, what I typically do, I don't get starstruck. I've met presidents, I've met kings, queens, prime ministers. They're all human beings, okay? So what I look at in people is I try to see the very best in people, and I try to pull that out of them. And unfortunately, that's the hardest thing to do, is convince somebody that they're good looking. That's a very hard thing to do. Convince somebody that they're talented. Pulling out the best in people is a chore sometimes. It is an absolute hard thing to do. But once you get it out of them and you convince them, and that's the hardest thing to do in life, is convince people that they're the real deal when you see the real deal. And getting the real deal to come out and enrich their lives, that's pretty much what my calling is. And whether somebody calls me in to talk about strategy of how to get their company to the next level, or how to get themselves to the next level, and that's what management's all about. Because typically artists, they're writing songs, they're on the road, they don't have time to work the business. And that's what my company really does, is get behind them and to allow them to do what they do best by me doing what they don't want to do. And that's the business side of it. So pulling out the best and doing the rest for an artist will get them on top easily.
So what does your normal, typical day look like?
Well, I wake up in the morning and I drink about 3 or 4 cups of coffee, and I get my blood flowing. And I generally get on the phone and just start connecting people. The that's one of the greatest things. One of the greatest things that I've been able to do is be a catalyst for a whole lot of people, connecting people, tying up the loose ends, connecting the dots. My day is spent all day long tying up loose ends, and those loose ends become shows from week to week for Gary P. Nunn, the Lost Gonzo Band, um, symposiums for people, corporations doing things. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. If somebody wants to get somewhere and they have the resources, I can pretty much get them there. Somebody asked me the other day, said, could you get me to space? And I said, I probably could. I could make enough phone calls, but you'd have to have a hell of a lot of resources to get there. But if you got all that, you got a chance. So, and I don't back down from a fight, and I will fight for my people that I'm working with. I will fight them for what's right. And I think you could ask Gary or anybody I've ever worked with. The one thing I do, and it's out of love, I will fight for them, and I will fight them to get them to where they want to be, sometimes in spite of themselves. And that's a true passion that I have. And when I feel led to do something, or I feel I have a passion to do something, I will fight with all my might to get them to where they need to be. And usually we're successful. 9 times out of 10, we're successful.
That's incredible. So your weekend then, do you tour with him then? Tour with Gary P. Nunn, or you usually have?
I like to go out. My job, I'm not a tour manager. We have a tour manager, Sam Burke, bless his heart, and it was Johnny Hondo. Most people know Johnny Burris as Johnny Hondo. I'll say he's one of the greatest guys in Texas music. I call him the mayor of Texas music. He's a guy who has a passion. The hardest person working in show business is John Burris, and he left us to go to work with Randall King, and we have Sam Burks now. I don't like to miss a show because I know 10 or 20 years from now, I'm never going to be able to go to one of those shows again.
Yeah.
I like to soak it in. I like to take it all in. And so when I'm not there, it really hurts. It really hurts because I want to soak everything we have in right now, because it won't be there 10 or 20 years from now. And that's what I encourage a lot of people. If you're sitting home on a Friday or Saturday night, shame on you, because you'll regret it down the line, because what's going on right now is absolutely magical, and it's going to be gone one day.
So then what do you find most challenging then?
I think
with what you do.
I think the challenge is trying to make everything that I have in my mind and my heart happen. There's a lot of spinning plates and juggling balls and everything. And I think sometimes that's you don't want to force anything. That's one of the biggest things that Kimmy Rhodes taught me, is you got to wait for the magic to happen. You got to have a lot of patience in what we do, because if you try to force something, you're going to break it. And you want it to happen as organic as it possibly can, but you have to be deliberate, but yet you have to let the organic magic happen. And so this requires a lot of patience, and that's a challenge too, because coming out of the political world, you had 2 years or 4 years or 6 years to campaign, usually 2 years to campaign for a candidate, and you had to force a lot of things. But in the world of art, the world of creativity, there's a lot of magic that has to happen, and it takes a lot of patience for that to happen.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you aren't kidding. I don't have patience. I guess that's not completely true, but
well, a lot of people say that I have a lot of patience. I tend to make decisions. A lot of the folks that I work with and work for I usually do things at the very last minute, because as you know, in show business, things can change quickly. So you don't want to start talking too much about one thing until you get right down into that target where you know what the weather's going to be like. You've got set times, and set times can change. And so there's another area right there that you have to be patient and just wait for everything to come together at the end. And that's usually when the magic happens, at the very end, when they go out on stage, right before they go out on stage, a day or two before, all of these things start coming together. And that takes a lot of patience for that too.
So what's been one of your favorite experiences? Something that's happened that's just like you'll never forget.
Well, I think my favorite experience when I got a call from my brother. Um, I got a call in 2000, May on December the 5th, 2011, and I was in a deer blind in Brady, Texas, and my brother says we have a problem, and they thought my mother was having a stroke.
Oh,
And I jumped in my car. I went to DFW, got on a plane and flew to her as fast as I could, and I brought her back to Dallas and spent 2 years with her. And every single day we did something. We went to a new restaurant. We had a new experience. We went to where she grew up in Oak Cliff, Texas, ironically, where Ray Wiley Hubbard and Michael Murphy grew up. Stevie Ray Vaughan grew up not too far from her, too. And we spent a lot of time in the Bishop Arts District reminiscing about things. And every day I had to think of something new to inspire my mother to live another day.
oh, that's so beautiful.
So
That
my
is,
mother,
no, that's so beautiful.
my
Beautiful.
mother, my mother inspired me in so many great ways.
You inspired her. Oh my gosh, to have such beautiful memories, to know that you had a limited time and to be able to use that time.
Yeah. Well, I think when she passed away, I think diabolically inside me, that's when I knew that life is very short, and you got to be who you are and not what the world says you need to be. And you go after it and you make it happen, and you use your God-given abilities. And that's what I really honed in on. And when I finally let go, uh, that's when, for the first time in my life, I can say that I became comfortable in my own skin, and everything around me fell into place. And I would encourage everybody, it doesn't have to be a death of a loved one, it could be anything. But if you can let go of all the imaginary things that you're holding on to, then life will happen around you. And so, yeah, I love my mother, and she inspired the hell out of me.
No, it sounds like you inspired her too. That's amazing.
Yeah.
What would you want your listeners to know about your path?
Well, I just want people, in the world that we live in today, it's a very divided world, and music is the great uniter. And I have found so much peace after seeing everything and observing everything in life to look for unity. We are all Americans. We are free, and we just and we don't need to be a divided nation. We need to inspire people. And you know, my favorite thing to do is to get out and go down to Terlingua and Big Bend and get lost. And that's where I find myself so many times. I spent almost a month down there recently shooting photographs and recharging myself. I think a lot of people just look on the surface. They're going down the road, they're getting to A to B, and you need to start digging underneath the surface. And that's where it all lies, is right beneath the surface. And if you're not seeing that, you're missing so much.
It is truly magical. We went there recently, and well, we've been there several times, of course, but we actually shot a music video, and it's just the sun sets, the stars in the sky. It's just
Wow.
incredible.
When you
And I've
wave your
seen you.
hand through, when you can wave your hand through the Milky Way on some nights down there, it's just breathtaking. And the way the light hits the sides of I always tell people, I go down there and I wait for the light to get to right to that golden hour, right before the sun goes down or right before the sun comes up. And I just chase the light all around that park. And I find some of the most magical images. And, that's what I like to do is, everything that I do on Facebook is to hope to really inspire people to go out and do things that they've never done before. And, or to call me and say, how can I do something outside the box, D? you know, people typically ask me that a lot, you know, how do you do what you do? And I can just say, you know, hey, I let go and I focused in on what God gave me as a talent. And I started using that talent. And that's where my life, I started living at the age of about 41. And, you know, before that, I was trying to climb the corporate ladder. There's no such thing in life. I mean, I look, you know, as a kid, you know, we used to play video games, Atari 2600, and you play Miss Pac-Man or Asteroid.
Tetris.
And yeah, all of those games that you would get to one level and you'd say, man, I'm not happy at level 1. I want to go to level 2, level 3, level 4. And you're never happy because you're always trying to get to the next level. But one thing that you can find in life, in the good times and the bad, is you can find joy in the good and the bad. And if you're always looking for joy, you know, and I'll go back to my mom, you know, when she took her last breath, she looked so beautiful and peaceful. And I found a lot of joy escorting her out of this world to heaven. And what I do at Green Hall or Lukenbach or Billy Bob's or the Grand Ole Opry or wherever it is, sometimes I close my eyes and I thank God that I'm standing right there watching something that I see the Reds and I see the Blues and I see the liberals and I see the conservatives and the Democrats and Republicans, whatever they call themselves. They're sitting in the same room, all agreeing that what they see in front of them is bringing them great joy and great unity. And that's a magical thing to watch happen. And in Texas, we've been very, very lucky to be able to experience all of that.
Amen. Oh my gosh. This is so amazing. This has been an amazing interview. Is there anything else that you'd like to share that I left out?
I think we covered everything. I mean, right now, I think there's not really anything that I think that I'm just going to keep doing what I do every day, and that's throwing it on the wall and hoping that there's a lot that sticks and a lot that inspires people. And I'm never going to stop until I take my last breath. And we live in a hard world right now, and I think that getting away from the news, getting away from the negative, and you know, finding creative things to inspire other people. That's what people have to do, is get away from living in the past or living in the negative and shoot for what's ahead of us and try to make something great happen. And that's what I strive to do every day.
So where can listeners find you if they want to see your beautiful photography or want to ask you a question about maybe moving, you know, how they can move forward?
Well, right now, you can find me on Facebook at D Foster. You spell it DEFOSTER, or you can find me on Instagram. I finally got on Instagram after a while. The thing about me is I do so much for other people, you know, on Instagram, and sometimes I forget about, I need to, you know, post stuff up there, but I've been pretty good about getting out and finding things to throw up there once in a while. And but when you work in the world that we work in, sometimes you forget about yourself and you're doing stuff for other people or thinking about other things, but that's where you can find me on Facebook and Instagram.
Well, thank you again so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to share this inspiration.
Well, I appreciate you, Bonnie, and I appreciate what you do. I know how hard doing podcasts are and getting everything together, and you're a beautiful person, and I wish you all the best with your music, and you're a very talented person, and it's great to see you.
Thank you.